and genetically of sight, sound, taste, or even mind. A journey into a wondrous land whose boundaries are that of imagination. There's a signpost up ahead. Next stop, Jake Stief. Hi, long-haired freaky dude here, and today I'm going to review the book The Great Conversation by Mortimer Adler and Robert Maynard Hutchins. This is the first volume of the first edition set of the Great Books of the Western World, a set of great books by Encyclopedia Britannica. Basically, it's a 131-page introduction to the set, but for some reason, most used sets don't seem to include it. I'm not quite sure why this is. Perhaps people felt it was the most valuable book of the set and wanted to keep it, or it just gets lost. Either way, I don't know. So basically, this book is divided into 4 parts. First of which is the credits. Don't really need to read those, but it is interesting to skim over and see what names you find. I found a few that I know in here, most of which were people who funded the project. Second part is the preface. And in here, Hutchins is pretty much describing the process they used to select the books within the Great Books set, and why not some books are in there. So if you're concerned as to why Twilight is not in this set, please consult to the preface. Now we get to The Great Conversation by Robert Maynard Hutchins. An essay on what the Great Conversation is, a collaboration of works from the greatest minds from the beginning of time, all the way up until now. And then this slowly morphs into what liberal education is, why we need it today, and why the American mind is being decayed because of the lack of a liberal education. He feels that industrialization has led to a breed of people who only crave to know and learn what is required of the job they desire. In other words, specialists. Now don't get me wrong, he doesn't disagree entirely with industrialization, but he does disagree with how people make use of the time and money they gain from industrialization. As for schooling, he feels that's just a method to keep children out of the workforce. We're forcing kids to learn various facts drilled into their mind that don't stick, rather than motivate them to expand beyond their educational endeavor. So, he believes that this can change through the use of great books, such as Homer, Shakespeare, Sigmund Freud, other various people. And if we encourage kids to read great books, then we will in turn become a greater country. One who knows a heck of a lot more than someone who just goes through the education system we have now. And, to be honest, I pretty much agree with this. I can learn a heck of a lot more through reading great books than just picking up small tidbits from biased textbooks. Now, at the end of this essay, there are quite a few radical proposals which he makes, such as one world government and imposing liberal education on everyone, which is quite incongruous with his the first section of his essay. But all in all, it was a very convincing argument for liberal education. Now, I've always sort of agreed with the ideas of liberal education, but was never able to convey an argument, a decent argument. But after reading this, I feel that I can. Now, I'd like to present a few quotes which I found in here that I liked a lot. And the first one is, "The remarkable thing about American education is that the difference between the educated and the uneducated is so slight." Has a lot of meaning, doesn't it? The other one is, "Great books are great teachers. They are showing us every day what ordinary people are capable of. These books came out of ignorant, inquiring humanity. They are usually the first announcement of success in learning. Most of them were written for and addressed to the ordinary people." With that, I move on to the fourth section of this book, which is pretty much a table of contents to the rest of the set, and a proposal, a 10-year reading plan, a proposal to a 10-year reading plan. I read carefully through the 10-year reading plan and thought it was kind of convincing at first, but decided against it. the first part is that the 10-year reading plan does not include all of the works. Quite a few of the works are omitted, actually. So if you want to dive through the whole set, I suggest not following this plan. Another thing is that it jumps around and zigzags quite a bit. Even mid-novel you stop and complete it in a later year, which I find quite a turn-off. So I feel if I am to read this set, I'm just going to read it straight through or come up with my own plan, which you'll probably find out in my blog in the link below. So, all in all, this was a great essay. I highly recommend you read it, even if you don't have the Great Books of the Western World set. I would buy this book just for the essay within it, even though it has a few references to the set. That's not necessary for your understanding of the knowledge inside of this book. So with that, I thank you for watching, and I will read the first few paragraphs, or maybe even the first chapter of The Great Conversation by Robert M. Hutchins. You can leave now, I won't be mad if you do, or you could stay and listen to my narration. Thank you. The tradition of the West is embodied in the great conversation that began in the dawn of history and that continues to the present day. Whatever the merits of other civilizations in other respects, no civilization is like that of the West in this respect. No other civilization can claim that its defining characteristic is a dialogue of this sort. No dialogue in any other civilization can compare with that of the West in the number of great works of the mind that have contributed to this dialogue. The goal toward which Western society moves is the civilization of the dialogue. The spirit of Western civilization is the spirit of inquiry. Its dominant element is the logos. Nothing is to remain undiscussed. Everybody is to speak his mind. No proposition is to be left unexamined. The exchange of ideas is held to be the path to the realization of the potentialities of the race. At a time when the West is most often represented by its friends and as the source of that technology for which the whole world yearns, and by its enemies as the fountainhead of selfishness and greed, it is worth remarking that, though both elements can be found in the great conversation, the Western ideal is not one or the other strand in the conversation, but the conversation itself. It would be an exaggeration to say that Western civilization means these books. The exaggeration will lie in the omission of the plastic arts and music, which have quite as important a part in the Western civilization as the great productions included in this set. But to the extent to which books can present the idea of a civilization, the idea of Western civilization is here presented. These books are the means of understanding our society and ourselves. They contain the great ideas that dominate us without our knowing it. There is no comparable repository of our tradition. To put an end to the spirit of inquiry that has characterized the West is not necessary to burn the books. All we have to do is leave them unread for a few generations. On the other hand, the revival of interest in these books from time to time throughout history has provided the West with new drive and creativeness. Great books have salvaged, preserved, and transmitted the tradition on many occasions similar to our own. The books contain not merely the tradition, but also the great exponents of the tradition. Their writings are models of the fine and liberal arts. They hold before us what Whitehead called the habitual vision of greatness. These books have endured because men in every era have lifted beyond themselves by the inspiration of their example. Sir Richard Livingston said, "We are tied down all our days, and for the greater part of our days, to the commonplace. That is where contact with great thinkers, great literature helps. In their company, we are still in the ordinary world, but it is the ordinary world transfigured and seen through the eyes of wisdom and genius. Some of their wisdom becomes our own." Until very recently, these books have been central in education in the West. They were the principal instrument of liberal education, the education that men acquired as an end in itself, for no other purpose than that it would help them to be men, to lead human lives, and better lives than they would otherwise be able to lead. The aim of liberal education is human excellence, both private and public. For man it is a political animal. Its object is the excellence of a man and man as a citizen. It regards man as an end, not as a means, and it regards the ends of life, and not the means to it. For this reason, it is the education of free men. Other types of education or training treat men as means to some other end, or are at best concerned with the means of life, with earning a living, and not with its ends. The substance of liberal education appears to consist in the recognition of basic problems, in knowledge of distinctions and interrelations in subject matter, and in the comprehension of ideas. Liberal education seeks to clarify the basic problems and to understand the way in which one problem bears upon another. It strives for a grasp of the methods by which solutions can be reached and the formulation of standards for testing solutions proposed. The liberally educated man understands, for example, the relation between the problem of the immortality of the soul and the problem of the best form of government. He understands that the one problem cannot be solved by the same method as the other, and that the test that he will have to bring to bear upon solutions proposed differs from one problem to the other. The liberally educated man understands, by understanding the distinctions and interrelations of the basic fields of subject matter, the differences and connections between poetry and history, science and philosophy, theoretical and practical science. He understands that the same methods cannot be applied in all these fields. He knows the methods appropriate to each. The liberally educated man comprehends the ideas that are relevant to the basic problems, and that operate in the basic fields of subject matter. He knows what is meant by the soul, state, God, beauty, and the other terms that are basic to the discussion of fundamental issues. He has some notion of the insights that these ideas, singly or in combination, provide concerning human experience. The liberally educated man has a mind that can operate well in all fields. He may be a specialist in one field, but he can understand anything important that is said in any field, and can see and use the light that it sheds upon his own. The liberally educated man is at home in the world of ideas and the world of practical affairs, too, because he understands the relation of the two. He may not be at home in the world of practical affairs in the sense of liking the life he finds about him, but he will be at home in that world in the sense that he understands it. He may even derive from his liberal education some conception of the difference between a bad world and a good one, and some notion of the ways in which one might be turned into the other. The method of liberal education is the liberal arts, and the result of liberal education is discipline in those arts. The liberal artist learns to read, write, speak, listen, understand, and think. He learns to reckon, measure, and manipulate matter, quantity, and motion in order to predict, produce, and exchange. As we live in the tradition, whether we know it or not, so we are all liberal artists, whether we know it or not. We all practice the liberal arts, well or badly, all the time, every day. As we should understand the tradition as well as we can get, and as we should understand the tradition as well as we can get, and as we should understand the tradition as well as we can in order to understand ourselves, so we should be as good liberal artists as we can in order to become as fully human as we can. The liberal arts are not merely indispensable, they are unavoidable. Nobody can decide for himself whether he is going to be a human being. The only question open to him is whether he will be an ignorant, undeveloped one, or one who has sought to reach the highest point he is capable of attaining. The question is short, is whether he will be a poor liberal artist or a good one. The tradition of the West in education is the tradition of the liberal arts. Until very recently, nobody took seriously the suggestion that there could be any other ideal. The educational ideas of John Locke, for example, which are directed to the preparation of the pupil to fit conveniently into the social and economic environment in which he found himself, made no impression on Locke's contemporaries. And so it will be found that other voices raised in criticism of liberal education fell upon deaf ears until about half a century ago. The Western devotion to liberal arts and liberal education must have been largely responsible for the emergence of democracy as an ideal. The democratic ideal is equal opportunity for full human development, and, since the liberal arts are the basic means of such development, devotion to democracy naturally results from devotion to them. On the other hand, if acquisition of liberal arts is an intrinsic part of human dignity, then the democratic ideal demands that we should strive to see to it that all have the opportunity to attain to the fullest measure of the liberal arts that is possible to each. The present crisis in the world has been precipitated by the vision of the range of practical and productive art offered by the West. All over the world, men are on the move, expressing their determination to share in the technology in which the West has excelled. This movement is one of the most spectacular in history, and everybody has agreed upon one thing about it. We do not know how to deal with it. It would be tragic if in our preoccupation with the crisis we failed to hold up as a thing of value for the world, even as that which might show us as a way to deal with the crisis, our vision of the best that the West has to offer. That vision is the range of the liberal arts and the liberal education. Our determination about this distribution of the fullest measure of these arts and this education will measure our loyalty to the best in our own past and our total service to the future of the world. The great books were written by the greatest liberal artists. They exhibit the range of the liberal arts. The authors were also the greatest teachers. They taught one another. They taught all previous generations up to a few years ago. The question is whether they can teach us. To this question we now turn. Thank you for watching an LZ Productions. Thank you for watching a LZ and Bibliophile Productions. Have a great day.